Everyone called them killer whales, and nobody took it seriously. The name became a brand, a theme park attraction, a logo on a t-shirt. Children pressed their faces against aquarium glass and laughed when the animal splashed them. The word killer sat right there in the name, and the entire world decided it was marketing, not a description. It is a description. The orca is the most sophisticated predator in the ocean. Not the most powerful, not the largest, the most sophisticated. There is a difference, and that difference is what makes the orca something that sits in a completely separate category from every other animal in the sea. Sharks have instinct. Orcas have a strategy. Sharks have teeth. Orcas have culture. And culture, applied to hunting, produces something that no amount of size or bite force can compete with over time. This is what orcas actually are, and why the ocean, on every coastline, belongs to them in a way it has never belonged to anything else. Start with intelligence, because everything else flows from it. The orca brain is one of the most complex biological structures on Earth. In absolute terms, an orca brain weighs approximately 15 pounds, roughly 3 times the weight of a human brain. But raw size is not the meaningful metric. What matters is the structure. Orca brains contain a highly developed paralimbic lobe, a region associated with emotional processing, social bonding, and self-awareness that is proportionally larger and more elaborately structured than the equivalent region in any other animal, including humans. Researchers studying cetacean neuroscience have described the orca paralimbic system as something that has no precise human analog, a structure that may support forms of social and emotional processing that we do not yet have the conceptual framework to fully understand. What we can observe behaviorally is extraordinary enough. Orcas live in matrilineal family groups that are among the most stable and long-lasting social structures documented in any non-human species. A mother orca maintains a bond with her offspring that persists for the animal's entire life. Adult sons, in particular, stay with their mothers until one of them dies. Research tracking specific orca family groups over decades has documented sons in their 30s and 40s still traveling with their elderly mothers, still receiving what behavioral data suggests is active support and guidance in hunting and social navigation. The grandmother effect, documented most thoroughly in orca populations off the Pacific Northwest coast of North America, shows that post-reproductive female orcas, grandmothers who can no longer have calves, contribute so significantly to the survival of their family group that their presence measurably increases the survival rates of their grandchildren. They carry knowledge, decades of accumulated information about prey locations, seasonal patterns, environmental changes, and social relationships within the broader population. That knowledge transfers. The family learns from the grandmother, and the grandmother's death creates a measurable gap in survival rates for the animals around her. This is not instinct. This is the transmission of learned information across generations. It is, by any functional definition, culture. And orca cultures vary dramatically. Populations of orcas living in the same ocean but in different social groups have developed hunting techniques, communication systems, dietary preferences, and social behaviors that are distinct enough that researchers classify them as separate cultures. The resident orcas of the Pacific Northwest eat almost exclusively salmon and have developed extraordinarily sophisticated techniques for locating and herding fish. The transient orcas in the same waters eat marine mammals exclusively and hunt using techniques so different that they might as well be a different species operating in a different world. In New Zealand, orcas have been documented intentionally beaching themselves at shallow shores to catch rays and sharks, a technique that requires precise knowledge of the beach geography, the timing of tidal patterns, and the ability to right themselves after the catch without becoming stranded. This behavior is taught. Young orcas practice it under supervision of adults. It is not genetic programming. It is education. In the Norwegian fjords, orcapods have developed a coordinated herring hunting technique called carousel feeding, where multiple animals work together to herd a school of herring into a tight ball near the surface using bubbles, flashes of their white undersides, and coordinated movement, then stun the fish with powerful tail slaps before feeding. The coordination required for this technique is not reflexive. It requires each animal to understand its role, anticipate the behavior of its group members, and execute its contribution at the right moment. It is cooperative problem-solving applied to hunting. In Antarctica, orcas have developed a technique for washing seals off ice floes that has been filmed and studied extensively and still generates genuine awe among researchers who have spent careers studying animal behavior. A group of orcas identifies a seal resting on a small ice floe. They line up. They swim together toward the floe in a coordinated wave, generating a wash that either tips the seal into the water or brings the water level up to where they can reach it. If the seal manages to get back onto the ice, they repeat the process. The technique has been documented passing from experienced adults to juveniles through observation and practice. In some filmed sequences, adult orcas appear to be demonstrating the technique to younger animals. making passes at reduced speed, pausing, allowing the younger orca to attempt the maneuver. They are teaching, deliberately, intentionally, with apparent awareness that the younger animal needs to learn and that the adult's role in that moment is to facilitate the learning. Now take everything that implies about orca cognition and apply it to their relationship with humans in the wild. There has never been a documented fatal attack on a human being by a wild orca. This fact is real and it is important. But understanding why it is true requires understanding something about how orcas operate that makes the absence of attacks more complex than simple harmlessness. Researchers who study orca behavior have noted that wild orcas show a consistent and deliberate pattern of restraint around humans in the water that is not explained by any simple instinctive avoidance. Orcas have approached divers and swimmers with what observers describe as intense curiosity, circling, examining, coming within feet of human beings, and then departing without aggression. They have done this in circumstances where the physical opportunity for attack was completely available, and the size and power differential made outcome inevitable if they had chosen to act. They chose not to, and the choosing is the part that matters. An animal this intelligent, this powerful, and this socially sophisticated does not refrain from attacking humans in the water because it cannot. It refrains because it has decided to. The distinction between cannot and will not is the distinction between a constraint and a choice can change. The events off the Iberian Peninsula that began in 2020 and have continued and escalated since have forced researchers to confront this distinction directly. Starting in the summer of 2020, a subgroup of orcas in the Strait of Gibraltar and along the Atlantic coasts of Spain and Portugal began interacting with sailing vessels in a way that had no precedent in recorded orca behavior. The animals approached boats, targeted the rudders, and applied force sufficient to disable steering. Dozens of incidents were recorded in 2020. Hundreds followed in subsequent years. Several vessels were sunk or required emergency assistance after rudder damage made them uncontrollable. The behavior spread. Animals that had not previously shown it began exhibiting it after contact with the original subgroup. The interaction pattern became more consistent, more targeted, and more effective at disabling vessels over time. Researchers have debated the origin and motivation of this behavior intensively. Some argue it began as play behavior in a young female who has been identified and named in the research literature. Others point to the possibility that a negative interaction with a vessel preceded the behavior and that what appears to be coordinated action is a form of learned diversion expressed toward boats. Others note that the targeting of rudders, specifically the most mechanically vulnerable point of a sailing vessel's ability to maneuver, suggests a level of functional understanding of boat mechanics that is difficult to explain as purely accidental. Whatever the origin, the behavioral trajectory is what demands attention. The behavior started in one animal. It spread through social contact to others. It has become more sophisticated over time, with groups of animals now working together on vessel interactions and coordinated patterns. And it has spread geographically, with incidents reported off the coasts of Scotland and Ireland from animals that appear to have learned the behavior from animals further south. This is cultural transmission of a behavior specifically directed at human technology. In the ocean, by an animal with a brain 3 times larger than yours, a social structure that has been stable for longer than any human institution, and hunting techniques refined over millions of years to the point where they constitute the most effective predatory system in the history of ocean life. The question that researchers have not publicly answered, but that the data implicitly raises, is straightforward. If orcas can learn, transmit, and refine a behavior specifically directed at human vessels over a period of years, what is the boundary condition on what behaviors they could develop? The absence of fatal wild attacks on humans is a historical observation. It describes the past. It is not a biological constraint that describes all possible futures. An animal that teaches its young to wash seals off ice floes, Tihet transmits hunting techniques across generations, that has developed distinct cultural practices in different populations across the world's oceans, is an animal whose behavioral repertoire is not fixed. It is an animal that learns, that innovates, and that spreads innovation through its community. The captivity record makes a different and darker argument. In captivity, orcas have killed human beings. 3 people have died in incidents involving captive orcas, all linked to a single male named Tilikum, who was involved in 3 separate fatal incidents over a period of 2 decades. The behavioral analysis of Tilikum's case by animal behaviorists and cetacean researchers points consistently toward the psychological consequences of captivity for an animal of this cognitive complexity and social sophistication. An animal designed by evolution for open ocean movement, complex social structures spanning decades, and culturally transmitted hunting practices, confined in a tank, performing repetitive behaviors for food rewards. The conclusions researchers draw are not complicated. The captivity created conditions that a brain this complex could not process without severe psychological consequences. And those consequences eventually expressed themselves in ways that were fatal. What that tells you about the animal's capacity is separate from what it tells you about the ethics of captivity. It tells you that the restraint wild orcas show around humans is not the restraint of an animal that lacks the capability for harm. It is the restraint of an animal that has, so far, in its natural context, chosen not to exercise that capability. The ocean covers 71% of the Earth's surface. In every part of it, orcas are present. In the Arctic, in the Antarctic, in the tropics, and the temperate zones. In the open ocean and in coastal waters, there is no ocean on Earth that does not contain orcas. There is no marine ecosystem where they are not the apex predator. They are everywhere. They have always been everywhere. And they have always known exactly what we are. Every diver who has had an orca circle them in open water and then depart has experienced the moment where the most intelligent predator in the ocean made a decision. The diver felt it and survived to describe it. The orca decided what to do, and so far, it has always decided the same way. The word so far is doing a great deal of work in that sentence. And in the waters off Spain and Portugal, and where boats are going into the sea and orcas are getting more precise about how they put them there, the weight of those two words is becoming something that researchers, sailors, and anyone who has ever looked out at the ocean and felt comfortable should be thinking about very carefully. The killer whale was always the right name. The world just forgot to ask why.